Hey there, welcome back to Friendly Ties. This is a podcast about board games, and today we're talking about Dice Miner, aka throwing a bunch of dice. So this is a game that I first heard about a year or two ago, and mostly it caught my attention because it's this game with a big pile of dice, and you stack them up on this angular board, and then you roll a bunch of dice, and I like die rolling. And I taught this one to you, Anastasia, and the ball or the die really got rolling from that point, right?
It sure did. Yeah, when did we first play this one?
Probably
It's
about
like-
6 weeks ago or so.
Yeah. And we played it like one night. I don't even remember the context. I think it was like a late night and you're like, "Oh, I like this dice thrower and like there's a bunch of dice and it's really light." And honestly, I'm not going to lie, I kind of judged this one by the cover. I was like, "I don't know, John." Like yeah.
Wait, and you own a copy now, right? Too? Or do you both?
I
of you?
do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
The short version of the story is I got interested. I learned it. I forced Anastasia to play it on Tabletop Simulator with me. And within 24 hours of that game, she sent me a message saying, I bought it. So
I'm pretty sure I bought it like
tracks.
immediately after.
12
that.
hours?
Yeah.
12 hours? Yeah. So that's a good prologue, I think, to talking about this game.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
probably had to probably 24 hours. I had to put together a whole order, right? Because I had to make an excuse to get free shipping.
Gotta get that free shipping. If you don't break 100, what's the
Gotta put
point?
that-
So this is a die rolling game that's it's got like dice pool building and die rolling. It's a pretty quick game. Nick and I just played like 15 minutes ago, and it took us about 15 minutes. Like, it's a really quick game. But it's all about grabbing dice from this mountain, and the dice are like I said, stacked up on this piece of cardboard. They kind of fall down in a pyramid style, and you're just trying to make a run of numbers with white dice, and you're trying to get a bunch of gems on the yellow dice. You're just getting points for doing these things, and you're just grabbing them back and forth. But like, the real thing, the kicker for me, and the reason I wanted to play this one and why I've infected Anastasia with it, was this idea that you do multiple rounds, and in each round you get dice, and then you keep them. So at the beginning of the game, you have 0 dice. And at the end of the first round, you probably have, depending on the player count, 7 to 10 dice or something like that in front of you. And you keep those, and then you do it again. You fill the mountain up, you go mining in the mountain again, and you have this backbone of all the dice you already grabbed. You re-roll them because, of course, this is a dice checker. But, at the end of the second round, you have 20 dice. In the end of the third round, you have 30 dice, at least, in like a 2-player game. So it's just, it's all about digging the dice out of the mountain and then making a mountain of dice in your area that you roll. And I found it to be enjoyable in some ways so far.
Really sold me on that one, John. Yeah, it's when you say like build a mountain, you don't like physically mean a mountain. It's just that you're throwing so many dice. It feels quite mountainous, maybe in your hands or upon the table.
I've only played it in Tabletop Simulator, but I feel like like if I was to physically play, Anastasia's the only one here who's played it physically, but
Can you hear that bag of dice? Can you hear it? Can you hear it?
I could just imagine
lot of
picking up
dice.
like 25 dice and throwing them or something like that.
Do you have to pick them up in separate groups to roll them? Is it possible to roll all the dice at once when you're at the end of the game?
It is. It's like an incredibly satisfying, like into your hands, like shake and roll that many dice at once. Like, you just kind of like get them all and like spew them in front of you. It's really satisfying.
Here's how we prove to our audience that we're not Warhammer 40K players, right?
Yeah.
I gotta say though, it is like, I mean, we can do some like dice ASMR here. Like, what you do have in the physical copy of the game now. It was a Kickstarter, and there are like, I think 2 versions. I think some people on the Kickstarter got like a 3D printed mountain, but I just have like the standard cardboard mountain. But it's still really cool. It's like a cardboard mountain, and like they've made it so it's like at like a 40, not a 45 degree. It's at an angle essentially. So when you do dump the dice out, I'm like making these hand motions. I could show the guys, but like, it's like you dump the dice out. They just kind of like slide into the mountain, and that is like extremely satisfying in its own right. And then obviously over the course of the game, you do, like John said, collect like 30 dice, but by round 2 you only have like 20, even in a 2-player game. And nevertheless, it's so satisfying to roll 20 dice.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we haven't mentioned in the description here is that the dice are different colors, and so when you're collecting the dice out of the mountain, that's really significant to you. But the face that they have rolled on the mountain is the face that you're taking them at. So you're sort of, when you're, I'll say drafting, when you're drafting a die.
You're mining.
You're mining a die.
Let's be clear, Nick. You are mining.
I apologize. When you're
Get
mining
into the
a
theme
die,
here.
there's two things that you're kind of going for there, is like what type of die it is and then what its current status is. So one of the more simple dice are the golden gem dice, and they can have 1, 2, or 3 gems on them, or beer. Everything can have beer. We'll come back to that later. But obviously, like, picking a yellow die with 3 gems on it is just much better than picking a yellow die with 1 gem on it. And it might change whether you say, well, I don't really want that yellow die with 1 gem on it, but I'm kind of playing a gem strategy. So yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah. I mean, this is not a Yahtzee game. I think a lot of people might assume that it would be, considering the amount of rolling we're talking about. There are lots of ways to re-roll dice, but you kind of have to buy them. But you have to consider those with the thing that you're thinking about, right, Nick? You grab that single gem die and you're thinking, maybe I'll re-roll this into a triple gem die. You know, it's a gem die. Like, it could get better, but you only have so many re-rolls available to you. So, you know, maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. There's like mini games with these colors. Like the gems, the person with the most gems at the end of the round doubles their gem score, or at least the score they got for that round. The white dice have pips on them from 1 to 5, and you're trying to make runs.
But very distinctly, runs that start with 1, which I kind of like love, right? Like, you don't just get points if you get any runs. You have to have like a full straight 1 up. Yeah.
And you get points equal to the pips on them. So yeah, if you have 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 0 points because you don't have the 1 to start things off. But then you roll that 1 and you just went from 0 to 15 points, which feels pretty good.
Yeah, I actually want to talk about that a little bit more, because, you know, you say, Anastasia, that you love having the 1 first, but it creates a really interesting dynamic that, like, first of all, either in drafting the dice, you're really hoping to get a 1. You know, drafting a 5 is like nearly pointless, depending on your stage of the game.
Mostly, yeah.
And then later on, you know, assuming that you and I have the same amount of white dice that we're rolling, and I roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, and you roll a 4, 4, 4, 4, I'm a lot better off than you, right?
Yeah,
totally.
I feel like something that you value a lot in games, particularly, is the ability to make something work with your things. You know, I find that you're often disappointed when your resource can't also do this, or you can't solve the problem in this way. And this one says, nope, you run the trench. Like, you start at the 1, and if you don't start at the 1, sucks to be you. So I want to hear like more about like why you love that it has that very tight restriction on it.
I think that what I find really interesting about all the mini games, John's brought up 2, and there's a couple more, and I'm sure we'll touch on them. The mini games being, you know, the different colors of the dice. I think that this one in particular, I like that they're all a little bit high risk, you know, high reward, and I like that even this one. I have to look at the breakdown of the dice, but I think there's more white dice than any other dice.
It does feel that
and
way.
So it seems at least like there's lots of those that come out.
Yeah.
And they're easy to take. And they're also kind of the thing you take when you have nothing else to take. So you kind of, you get them. And I would say in the 4 games of this I played, having white dice can be incredibly strong. And if you get a lot of them and you kind of play that strategy, you are very likely to do well. But there's also a risk that you're not going to roll that 1, or you are going to roll. This is not a game to roll a Yahtzee. You know, you are going to roll a Yahtzee, and like that's not good for you. And I guess I like that kind of like in this game at its weight, at its time. I like that kind of like, you know, win or bust kind of idea. You know, as John kind of talked about, you play over 3 rounds and you're constantly re-rolling your dice. So I like that in one round you may have 3 straights, 1 to 5, and look at that, 45 points. But that doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to have 45 points in the next round. And I like that can happen. And I think that by having them start with 1, you guarantee that they're not just going to be this super overpowered, that like if you just take all the white dice and you do that, you're going to just like, you're guaranteed to win. I like that there's this catch, there's the luck element. You know, that's a big part. I mean, in a game with this many dice, you have to accept that it's massively luck based, right? Like, like it's just like, that's an element.
I will say, like, as far as the white dice are concerned, like that game that Nick and I just played, right before we turned on the recorders here, going into the third round, I could tell that I was a bit behind to maybe quite a bit behind. And I had a decent number of dice, and I ended up with 2 straights that were 1, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 3, 4, 5, 1, 3, 4, 5. So effectively 2 points total because I was missing those 2s. And then on my very first reroll near the end of the round, I rolled 2 2s. Like my very first reroll, like it was just like, oh, boom! I went from 2 points to 30 from that. And okay, that was luck. And honestly, I had like 11 rerolls in the bank. So getting there already like felt really good. I felt pretty confident I was going to get at least 1, 2, and it was nice just to get them immediately. But the flip side is that I could have just missed those and like been really down. But like Anastasia was just mentioning, like it's a quick game, and for the play space, like decision space of a quick game like this, you can't play cautiously. I think if you play cautious, timid dice miner, you're just going to be disappointed. Like this game seems to always be telling you like, shoot for the moon, it's a 25-minute game. Like, don't settle for that 1 gem. Go for the 1 in 6. Go for the 1 in 6. And because when you get it, like it feels really great. And if you don't get it, you're like, well, it was a 1 in 6. It makes sense I didn't get it.
I tried to get it right. And I'll totally admit, like I played this with my dad. And he was in a similar position to you, John. Actually, he was in even more of Nick's position, where he must have had like 15 white dice. Like he was doing so well, and in the last round of the game, he just could not roll a straight. Like it just, like he still ended up getting a bunch of them, but they just didn't work out as well as he thought he would. He did not roll the 2 2s, to put it that way, and but he still absolutely enjoyed himself trying to get that to happen. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about. And, we haven't touched on this yet. So John has mentioned, that, you're basically, I've been calling it like a dice building game, which is like, it's sort of
that
like,
works.
Right? Like it basically, that's how I pitched it. Dice pool building. Yeah.
Dice
It's
pile.
not like a bag builder. It's a dice. Yeah. I don't think I've ever played a game like this where you like are like collecting dice and then re-rolling them. Like this anyway. That's how I pitched it to my partner. I was like, it's gonna be like a deck builder with dice, and I love that. Like that for me is like that alone was like I was in. Then you have these like 5 different types of dice. Each have a little mini game. We've talked about 2 so far. Love that. But the third piece of it is that so over the course of these 3 rounds, you are mining, quote unquote, which is just drafting dice off the mountain. You're collecting your trove of dice. But then after each of those rounds, you have a magic round, essentially. So the one of the other types of dice is just like, it's called magic, but it's basically just reroll ability. Over the course of the game, you have a choice of if you want to take more dice that will give you the dice that literally give you the ability to re-roll your other dice. And that to me is so much fun, because instead of like how it often is in a drafting game where like you take what you get, you always have this like knowledge that you have a chance that you could roll these dice into something better. So, going back to what you asked me, Nick, like this idea of like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter if I take a 2. There's always a chance I'm going to roll it into a 1, or if I take a 5, I'm going to roll it into whatever I need. And just that, like the chance, you know how that is. It's addictive in any luck game. It's like, maybe I will get this into something better. Yeah. And I love that.
I mean, there's a chance if you're playing like Anastasia, right? Like I because you're inherently just the way your brain is wired. I've played a couple of games that, like, you go for those reroll dice. The game I just played with Nick, I think you ended with like 2 reroll dice, and I had like 12.
Yeah, that's
true.
And you beat me by like 8 points. Like, it was super close. But every one of those reroll dice that I had for you was a die that was just getting you points.
Right. You had a nearly perfect roll for the dice that you had, but
a quarter of my dice just let me reroll other dice.
Right. The magic dice don't score you any points, and so I just kind of had enough, I guess, raw points there to make it.
You did that yesterday too. When we played yesterday, you did the same thing. You had like So what is that? Is that just that is like you mitigating the luck as that's just Nick being Nick.
Color me surprised. Nick goes for the value. Yeah.
I think it's less like strategic than you think. It's just that I drafted dice that mattered for me in the moment, and then I happen to have these sets, and I'm never like, oh, I need magic, because I don't tend to take things or go out of my way to take things that could become something cool, right? I'm going to choose like what can I do the best with in the moment. But what's cool in these games, in both games, I was winning in round 1, and in the game that we played yesterday, I was ahead in round 2, and I was so cocky that I was like going to win in the third round. And I actually like have come to realize, and I think this is very appropriate for a game of this like weight and class and everything like that, is that the scoring in the third round is so wild. It's like Family Feud, right? Where it's like the first round they score points, and then they double the points, and then they triple the points. It really only matters if you win in the third round. Like, and it's like that. Like this game, like, yeah, your points from earlier matter, they add, but like the points you're going to get in the third round are not just triple, because the points are not scaled linearly. And so you have just so many more opportunities to like multiply your dice together if you're doing sort of the hazard strategy, or we talked about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are those veins? Are those gold veins? Is that what what are they supposed to represent?
What are they? They're called something. No, let's be thematic. Let's look. We have the game right here. Let's see. Those are they're tunnel dice.
Tunnel dice, right? So
you're digging tunnels.
You're digging,
you're tunneling into the mine.
Digging deeper tunnels, or
yeah,
whatever,
a tunnel
right?
without an
Like
entrance
veins
is a
too.
pointless tunnel. The one is the
Oh my
entrance.
God, John.
There we go.
John, just drop the mic, drop the beer.
Yeah.
My point is just that the points are chaotic and rising. And so I think a game like this wants your point, you to feel like you are smart and cool early, but it also wants every player to have the opportunity to win. And it does that in the way that it scales, where it feels like you're going to have double the dice or triple the dice, but actually the points are possible to be even more majestic than that.
Yeah, I mean, the game we just played, my final score is 86, but in the first round I scored 3. so there you go.
Which I think is good, because in a game like this, it is very easy. I mentioned that game I played with my dad, and he had like 10 points on me in the first round, but then I had like 50 on him in the second. And so, it felt like I was so far ahead. And then I still won that game, but he was able to come back, to your point, Nick, drastically in that third round. And so that does feel good. Like you don't really want a game when it's luck based. There's always a chance it's going to be a blowout, and I'm certain you can play games of this where it is a blowout.
Yeah.
But you do always. I mean, in a way, the game we played against Nick yesterday, we believe we did a 3-player yesterday.
It was a blowout.
It was a blowout, and yet John and I still had a ton of fun. And frankly, we just started playing against each other.
Yeah.
And so obviously I won, and it's just it's not obvious.
I'm tunneling over here, guys.
Yeah, Nick the Tunneler destroyed us, but we just ignore him.
But then I
down
won
there.
the game because we weren't counting Nick's win. But my point being that like you can turn it into that when it plays this quickly, and then like I completely agree with you, Nick, that like when things balloon like that, it's like the whole theme of the game. You never feel like you're really out of it. You can always find something else cool in the mine.
Yeah.
But I think we should talk about beer, because that's the other really, really fun thing. I didn't even mention that.
There's quite a few neat little things in this quick dice game, but beer is, I think, maybe the neatest of them. Because we've been talking about randomness and rolling dice and everything, but beer is anti-thematically enough the way that you control things the best. So every die face has a 1 in 6 chance of being a beer, which you could roll into, or you could just pull a beer out of the mountain. And when it's your turn to take a die from the mountain, normally you just take from the top of like a pyramid of dice, essentially, as they kind of fall down. But you could instead give an opponent a beer die, say cheers, and roll it in front of them, give it to them, and then take 2 dice from the mountain, and you can take it from the edges of the mountain, not just the peaks. So you're not only doing a double grab, but you're doing a significantly more versatile double grab with each of those dice that you're taking, and at the low price of potentially giving your opponent's points, and you don't know what it is, right? So the randomness does sneak in. Like, I cheers Anastasia, I roll the white die. I'm really, really, really hoping I don't roll a 1 because, she's got the 2, 3, 4 already. But that's just a calculated risk that I do, and now I grab these amazing dice from the mountain. And I found that that's like a deceptively cool, almost like abstract puzzle aspect to this game, where if I have a beer or two in front of me and it's my turn, I can look at the mountain and think, okay, well, this is good, that's good, but what if I double grabbed? And and oftentimes it's like, oh, I could take this, which clears that off, which lets me grab that, triple gem or something like that. And that's, I wouldn't have been able to get that otherwise.
It's so funny because I think that I like beer. I completely agree with you, but I think I like beer for the completely opposite reason. Like, yes, strategically, I like, it's like great to get the double grab and it is the most control that you get. But like, frankly, for me, what I love about beer is just the complete silliness of it. Like like you're playing a game where you like, first of all, the rules literally say you need to say cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. And then you are literally giving your opponent a die, which I love because we talked about this a lot over the year. I guess it has been years plural that we played Anno 1800, that it's oftentimes rare to find a game where like you are giving something to your opponent in like a very friendly way, and within reason. I mean, John, obviously shared incentives is a big thing that you have found to love over the last year with the train games and stuff like that. But where it's like truly like, I am giving you a thing that is just inherently good for you. And like, sure, I'm getting a benefit, but it's just like, it's so friendly. And I just like, I love that. Like, I just love that me getting this benefit of taking 2 dice for the mountain. I am like literally just giving you more points, more magic, well, I guess with the hazards, I can be giving you a bad thing, but we haven't talked about those yet. But like for the most part, I'm giving you a die that adds to your options, and I just think that and you re-roll it, so you're basically you choose the person you're giving it to, and obviously in a 2-player game, you just give it to your opponent, but you basically choose them, re-roll it, and then they get whatever it shows up at. Like last night, John handed me like a treasure dice, a beer die, and then I had 3 gems, and I was like, sweet, like and I just think that's lovely, like just a lovely little piece to the game.
I remember when I taught this to you, I feel like that was the moment I could feel you lighting up about it. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I get things for free.
And the other thing is like beer is worth no points, so like the game is really incentivizing you to give it to somebody else. I mean, you might be able to re-roll it into something good, sure, but I mean, you might be me and have 12 re-rolls at the end of a round, but you could instead be Nick and have 2. And so, those re-rolls can be really precious. I just think I agree. I like how kind of almost pressured you are into using it. Then again, Nick, you were hoarding beer in the game we just played, so maybe I've been overly kind.
I think in some cases that was me playing poorly. I think the only thing about beer that I wish was a rule, and I can see why it's not a rule because it's an exception, and exceptions are just annoying in games that are light, especially. But I don't love that you can pick up a beer with a beer, and so if you're like using a die and you get 2 dice, and one of them is a beer, and then one of them is like the best die on the table for you,
like
and then you just kind of keep doing it over and over and over again. Like, yes, you are giving your opponents extra dice, but it doesn't really cost you, right? Because you pay a die but gain 2 dice instead of gaining 1 die on your turn. It's just that it's nice for your opponent.
That's a good point. I think I did it 3 times in our last game.
And I don't love that chaining aspect of it. I do love that it lets you cheat a little bit, though. And I mean, my favorite part of this game mechanically is the pyramid drafting, but it can be in such a way that the pyramid drafting is too brutal for you, and so the fact that you have an opportunity to circumvent it is, I think, necessary, and they did it in a nice little clever way here. That's cute.
Yeah. I will say that with the chaining, like in the game that we just did, I think there was one round where I did it 3 times, but every time I did it, I rolled a die and gave it to you. We were playing a 2-player game, and I distinctly remember you needed white 2s, and I kept getting white beers, and I kept giving cheers, and I would roll the die. I'm like, no twos, no twos, no twos. So it was almost like I was gifting you with rerolls in that case, and I got lucky. I actually hit no twos, and that's part of the reason why I was competitive in that game. But yeah.
So there is a negative aspect of this game, if you will. So there's one type of dice that gives you, that has literally dragon on it, and dragons, and I guess
rock
the other
falls.
One is rock falls,
cave in,
asteroids, whatever, however you want to take it. And those dice inherently are negative points. And then there's the last type of dice, which is like tools, which basically have either a shield or tools or a pickaxe or whatever. I actually love this. If you have the right tool to match up with the hazards, you can actually turn the negative of the hazards into a positive.
Right.
And this is another, I think, beautiful way to create not only good tension in the game, but also an opportunity to turn what would inherently just could be a mean thing. Like we talked about, if you have a beer, you could be like, oh, let me give you this negative beer, because every dice has a beer. That could be really negative, but you always have an opportunity to turn them positive. And then if you have, for example, multiple shields, they multiply the number of dragons that you have. So I think is really fun and really clever, and a nice way to balance out just this kind of last piece of the game.
Yeah. I think the green dice are really nice, and a good example, probably the prime example in this game of things being valued differently by different players. Mostly you want to collect, I think, a lot of if you have a lot of white dice, it's better to have more white dice because you increase your chance of yellow dice. It's better to have more yellow dice because then your gems are more likely to double. The green dice are neat because if I have a lot of black dice, suddenly I really want to get a bunch of green dice. And that, at the beginning of the game, the green dice are probably in some ways the weakest. They don't really do a lot for you because you don't have any problems to solve. I just like that they change power throughout the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, going back, we keep harkening to this game we just played because it's really fresh on my mind, but I lost 4 points in that first round because I didn't defend against a dragon, and then I had one shield in the last round, and I had 16 dragons. It's so many dragons, and that turned into positive points there. And you beered me multiple hazard beers, and because I had all those rerolls, I was able to reroll my defensive green dice into turning them into points. And in fact, I remember you were saying at the end of that game that you felt like it was actually maybe a mistake to beer me those hazards.
Yeah. I either needed to steal the green dice from you or not be giving you the black dice because I just didn't realize how much of a turnaround it could be.
Yeah.
Although yesterday you guys watched me roll those green dice so many times and not get what I needed, and that is,
sometimes you're just, if you're bad at the game, you're bad at the game,
Ooh.
You should just be like Nick, roll the dice once and just get 3 sets immediately. It's easy.
Rerolls are for chumps. Just make the numbers be.
If anyone ever had any doubt that Nick was good at games across the gamut, even in a game completely based in luck where there is just total randomness, he still wipes the floor with us. So what I do want to, before we move off of the hazard dice and the idea of turning these hazards positive, I do want to say one thing, and the guys are gonna mock me for this. So the first couple of times I played this, including the first play with John, where we both got this wrong, might surprise you. Occasionally, very occasionally, even John gets a roll wrong. No, so the first time we played this, John and I both misread a rule in the rule book, which was that you can never re-roll the hazard dice.
You can't magic them.
And you can't magic them, right?
Yeah,
so you can't
using those blue dice.
Exactly. And I played it wrong then that time with John, and then a time with my dad, time with my partner, several other times. And basically in every play I played subsequently after that, until we played it correctly yesterday, I loved that you could re-roll the hazard die, because it made them never negative. And then me loving that you could turn a negative into a positive, I like played that. I played it as a strategy, and for me, it added like a completely different strategy that you could play in the game. I didn't like the high risk, high reward of the tunnel dice. You know, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was like, no, you go do that. I'm gonna just try to like gather all the dragons and then get all the shields and then just have like a gazillion points. And honestly, that may be why that you're not allowed to do that.
That's my guess too.
But yeah. Okay. Well, if the designer is listening to this, feel free to tell me in the comments or anyone else why. But like then we played yesterday and then we couldn't do that. And then the hazard dice like really just dragged me down. And I was sad. I was like really sad to lose that. So I'm not one to sit here and like argue for changing the game. And I just, I mean,
I feel like there's a but there.
Yeah, but I am allowed to sit here and argue.
The guys tonight were like, I was like, which rules are you playing? They're like, the real ones.
The actual rules.
I was like, not my rules.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that you can re-roll the defensive dice, the green dice. And I think that's kind of where it's supposed to be. Like, I think the hazards are supposed to be hazards. You know, they're like, okay, this dragon is happening. There's no unhappening the dragon. So where's the freaking shield? I'm gonna roll this green die. Like, where's the shield? Where's the shield?
I love that. Like, if I had like only a single cave-in, I could roll into a triple cave-in and like,
or re-roll a quadruple dragon into a beer and then give it to somebody. Yeah.
No. I was all in. I was like, oh, double dragon. I want a quadruple dragon.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I mean, I think it definitely messes with the theming of the game. I think it messes with a lot of things. But I guess, okay, so this is what I will say. I don't know what I'm going to do going forward because I haven't played it enough with the real rules to compare, and it's not really a fair comparison. But what I will say is that if you were to play this game and you didn't enjoy the hazards in their natural state, you could play with Anastasia's rules.
Full anarchy.
And
that's true. I mean, to a certain extent, play the game that makes you most happy, right?
Exacty. So if
I
for
strongly
whatever
suspect
reason,
the rules there for balance reasons, but
I'm sure that they are, and I completely agree. And I think it's an excellent game. It's a lovely filler. I bought it. I enjoy owning it, and I'm not letting it go. But I mean, I might just play it both ways. So I'm just putting it out there for people in case they wanna try it out. And then I also do. I think I need to play it more, and I'll probably have more feelings on that. But I would be remiss not to mention that did impact a lot of my enjoyment of the game has been playing it that way, and we'll see. So anyways.
Yeah. One thing we haven't touched on really at all, and I think it's pretty important to mention, is player count. The three of us have played it 3 players once, 4 players never, and then a pile of 2-player games. And it's really fun at 2 players, but there is no difference in the die pool with the player counts. It's always 60, 60. It's always 60 dice. So in a 2-player game, you're hypothetically going to get access to about 30 dice. In a 3-player game, you're getting access to about 20 dice, and in a 4-player game, you're getting access to about 15, spread over the course of those 3 rounds. And I think, these things that we're talking about, like, this isn't just a full tangent. Like, the hazard combo, there's only 7 of those green defensive dice in the entire game. So in a 2-player game, you'll probably frequently have like 3-4 splits with those. But in a 4-player game, like, there isn't even enough for everybody to have 2 of them. And so when it comes to like the big hazard combo, even like playing it correctly, you get the shield, you get all these dragons, it's going to be a lot harder. And I'm genuinely quite curious to try this one at 4 players, especially after we played it at 3. I strongly suspected I was actually not going to like it at 3 very much. I thought this was going to be like a 2-player only game. I'm going to roll my 20 plus dice. But then we played a 3-player game, and it was like, oh, that was actually that was fun. Like that was not like slower than I expected. I still had a mountain of dice. My worry is I would miss the 30 dice in front of me. But then I had like, 22 or something, and that's still a ton of dice. And so I'm wondering, if like 14 or 15 dice will feel meager in comparison. But I just think, the scores are going to fluctuate a lot less, and you're going to be able to put together a lot less of these ultra combos, which might make it even more interesting, like tighter. from a drafting perspective? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it might make it tighter, but it's a good question to see, like, does it make it less fun? Because right when we kicked off, the first thing we were talking about was the aesthetics of the game and the feeling of hucking a bunch of dice and everything like that. So you don't get to build up these big things. And yeah, I think to your point, probably the drafting part of it becomes more significant than the I have piles of dice part of it. Because you have more control over essentially like what's happening in those scenarios.
Your score ceiling is going to be a lot lower too, right?
Totally.
So, the third round insanity will be tamer. I will say that there comes a point if you roll so many dice that hypothetically you should start to see some like expected values for various things. If you roll one die over and over again, 8 times throughout the game, you could see a crazy streak. But in this game, you're rolling 60 dice at least once, but you're probably, discreetly rolling well over 100 dice over the course of the game. And I just think that you're probably going to start to see some lines there. Like
I come from like a tabletop role-playing game background. You never trust the dice. They are fickle and errant. If you are going to assume that they're going to do something in large systems, you are wrong.
No, I'm with John. It's all about the magic and the mine. And Nick is right that you can never trust the dice. But I do think, John, you're onto something that, like, even if you have no control over the dice, because it really is all luck, there is something about this game that makes you feel like you have luck. I love that there's a magic round, so I have a chance of turning this into something else. Or, I collected all these dice, so I have a chance that they're gonna like all roll perfectly the way I want to. And so I do like having that perceived sense of control that's actually not control, that somehow I collected enough dice that, of course, I'm going to roll, fantastically.
Yeah. This game it has input and output randomness, especially in that second and third round. You roll this pile of dice that you chose to take, and then you're like, oh, I didn't get any sets, or I can't believe I didn't roll any 2s. And then you look at the mountain. There's 20 more dice on there, and you look, are there 2s on the mountain? Oh, there is. Where is it? Oh, it's underneath that thing over there with a dragon hazard on top. Oh, let's see, Nick has a shield. Maybe Nick will go after that. And then I had the output randomness of rolling all my dice, and then there was the input randomness of rolling the mountain dice, but then you have to compete with your opponents to try and run after those things. And I think this is probably why it feels like there is a bit of control there, because there is to a certain extent.
There is.
Yeah, there definitely is. And you're right. I do think that that's nice. The reason that it leans more on the chaos side is because it's output randomness at the beginning of the round when you roll, input randomness when you're drafting, because it's already kind of put out there, and then again back to output randomness when you're doing your rerolls by using your magic. So it's sandwiched by what those factors look like.
Yeah. So where I land with this one is I feel like I'm totally down to play it whenever. I don't think I'm going to rush out and get a copy of it myself. I'll try to play Anastasia's copy at some point, I think. But I think there's a lot of situations where I would really quite enjoy it. And honestly, if I see this one on sale, I might not be able to stop myself. And I think that's, says a lot for it. I mean, I do tend to play a lot of games with people who play more medium to heavyweight type of experiences. And I have a lot of lighter games already, but I don't know. I've enjoyed my small handful of plays of this one already, and for all these reasons, I'm hoping we get some more in.
I think my only closing thought is that as John said, I'm probably not going to pick up a copy myself. Would be cool to play it if someone wanted to play it as a quick filler here and there. I do think, however, that if you are kind of like a gamer family and you have younger kids, this is just a great option. Or if you're like, people that at work or in the rest of your family are like down to try games, it's a cool option because there are decisions in this game that make a difference, that make you feel like you're engaged, but it is chaotic, and so everyone's live, and I think that's something that's very valuable when you're looking for games to engage those kinds of gamers.
Yeah, it's a great lunchtime game, right?
Totally.
100%. 100%. No, and that's exactly where it falls for me. I mean, this game reminds me of the same way I felt about Cape May. This is a very, except this is obviously the lighter version. This is just a very easy game for me to pull out with my friends that are not gamers, but like of the level that they enjoy a game with a little bit more meat on it. It was a perfect game to play with my dad. Like it fits that nice spot of it's not a super light game. I always compare it to Zombie Dice, which is oddly a hit in my home. I don't even like it that much, but we do. It does come out a surprising amount. And for me, I'm kind of hoping this will replace Zombie Dice because I think it's sort of like the next level up from that. I don't know. My partner still loves Zombie Dice. Loves all sorts of games. We'll play a super heavy game, but something about Zombie Dice. Anyways, I brought it home in the hopes that it kind of could be that, because for me it adds all the things we've talked about. It just adds a couple of additional layers of thinking and thoughts, and just it's fun.
Yeah. Well, if you have any thoughts about Dice Miner, if you've played this one or have any questions about it, we would love to hear. There is a YouTube version of this. You can find a link to it in the description of this episode. Hop on over there and leave a comment. And thank you so much for listening.